we're starting out with a success story for this event. I was so inspired to hear about when Chrissy initially introduced me to Trish. It was a very inspiring story, especially to hear about Trish's her background and the journey that she's had from L&D to project management to being an executive, just all these different things. And then also with Chrissy, who's somewhat, I think that she's very experienced, but I know that she's probably been in L&D, maybe a couple years or so. I can't recall.
Just celebrated my first full-time year.
Full year, but definitely very capable. So let me read a couple bios for them. Trish joins us with over 20 years of experience in leading teams and driving strategic business transformations, most recently as a VP, where she established a new training organization. She's passionate about people leadership and has successfully led both remote and on-site teams in various size companies, and is eager to share her insights on transitioning into corporate training or instructional design. Chrissy is an instructional designer based in Austin, Texas, has transitioned from being a theater teacher to a role in L&D at a SaaS-based insurance software company. And we do have, I think, one of our weekly TLD casts where we talk with Chrissy, and I love the story, just her background in theater. It's so wonderful, and just the amount of love that she had for her students. With a background in education, communication, and graphic design, she has over a decade of experience in crafting learner experiences and is passionate about sharing insights on her successful career. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen. Trish and Chrissy are going to take over, and they're going to discuss the applicant and the hiring manager, a success story. All right. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Luis. Real quick before we get started, for accessibility purposes, I'm going to give a visual description. So I am a white Hispanic female. I've got dark brown hair, brown eyes. I'm wearing a really dark green, kind of like a thermally shirt and a gold necklace. Here with me today, I have Trish Lechner. Trish, do you want to give a visual description real quick?
Sure. I'm a older white female with short hair, a dark green sweater with a V-neck, and I like to smile, so you'll see my teeth a lot. And I live in Ohio, by the way. We didn't get to go Bucks. I'm from Ohio, where I'm located. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks. Well, thank you again, Luis, for having us. Trish and I are really excited to be here today. We have a really exciting story to share with you. A lot of times when we're talking about the application process into L&D, you'll hear what it's like either through the application process of someone trying to get an interview and get hired, or you'll hear from someone who is in the managerial position of what it takes to get hired. Rarely do you get to have that same story told by people who have shared the same experience together. So we're really excited to kind of share our story today from my perspective as the applicant and Trish's perspective as the hiring manager. So I'm going to share my screen, and to give you a brief roadmap, today Trish and I are going to talk to you about 5 main areas of the process from both of our perspectives. So we're going to talk through resume, portfolio, research, interview, and salary. And we're going to jump right into resume. So as Luis said earlier, I have a background in teaching, and that's going to kind of guide a lot of my experience and perspective of what I share with you today. And the one thing that I want to kind of convey most importantly when you're constructing your resume, trying to break into L&D, especially if you're coming in from a teaching background, is that teaching is not instructional design. There are so many applicable skills that we have as teachers, which is why I think we're often drawn to learning and development. But it's really important to kind of learn the L&D jargon and to understand the differences and to be able to advocate for yourself. And your resume is the first place where you're going to be able to do that. One thing I learned a lot throughout my process is that L&D is a world that was new to me coming from education, but for a lot of hiring managers, education is a world that is as unfamiliar to them. So it's our responsibility to kind of educate them in a way of how our skills and our experience are applicable. And you can start by doing that in your resume. I like to say you're going to want to get a little creative, but also be honest about your experience, because they are two different sectors. So I've pulled some examples that I used in my resume of what that looks like realistically. So from the teaching experience, I could say that I taught and created lessons for multiple levels of theater, theater tech, and art for 8 years. How I translated that into my resume for instructional design positions is I said that I analyzed the training needs of cross-curricular course offerings for 300 plus new learners annually. And what that did was a couple of things. It took my experience from teaching and took the applicable parts and translated it into a learning and development resume using various keywords that are probably going to appear in your job description, things like training, instead of creating lessons. Course is, a term that's used that you don't often hear in teaching, but you'll hear it in learning and development. And then anywhere that you can include analytics is great. So even having the amount of learners, and that's another term, learners instead of students, the amount of learners that you dealt with in an annual year can help make your experience applicable. Quickly, another one, I taught during the pandemic. We know as teachers that includes so many different experiences and skill sets, but the way I translated it was that I facilitated and taught in-person, virtual, and hybrid courses, leveraging a variety of technological interventions for both instructor-led and e-learning programs. Again, you'll see some keywords pulled out here. So facilitated is a term that you use in learning and development, whereas in teaching we would call that just teaching, right? And then it's important to distinguish between instructor-led and e-learning courses or e-learning programs. Again, just getting yourself familiar with the learning and development jargon, kind of being able to speak to your experience in terms that your hiring manager is going to be able to understand. Okay, for your portfolio, the first thing I would ask yourself is, do you even need a portfolio? It's going to depend on the roles that you're applying for within learning and development. So for example, if you are wanting to get into LMS administration or learning management system administration, you probably won't need a portfolio for that kind of work. But any role that you're wanting to get into that has to deal with design work, curriculum development, you need to be able to showcase that work, because at some point in your interview or in your application and interview process, that will come up. So if you can present with the hiring manager with examples of your work beforehand, that's going to help you and set you apart from people who may not have done that, or either wait for their interview to do that. If you can get that in front of them beforehand, that's going to make all the difference. And my biggest recommendation for people who are working on or building a portfolio is to not just showcase your final project. You need to showcase your process, because it's not just about, creating a course in a certain tool or within a certain software. You have to be able to justify your design choices based off of the problem or the training need, because not all problems are going to have their solution be training, right? So you need to be able to explain that process of why you made the decisions that you made to get to that final project. I would say the process is showcasing the process is almost more important than what the final project looks like or what it all includes. And I think your portfolio is also a really great place to showcase how you can bring your own personal design style into your work while maintaining branded guidelines. So I'm going to show an example here from my portfolio. And one thing I did when I started working on my portfolio is I looked and I researched to find as many portfolio examples as I could. I really wanted to know what other people were doing. And one thing I started to see is that there are so many formulaic portfolios out there. You can really see that, some talking head or some academy told people this is what your portfolio needs to look like. This needs to be the format and the structure. And I just thought, from the hiring manager's perspective, if I see the same portfolio over and over and over again, how could I differentiate myself as the applicant, right? So what I wanted to do was bring more of my personal design into my portfolio work. And that's speaking as someone who I know one of my strengths is visual design. So I know that's a way in which I can set myself apart from others. So I would look at things that other people were doing or the way they structured their portfolio. And I would say, okay, I really like that. I want to include, this aspect or this idea in my portfolio, but I think I could do it better. I think I could do it this way. Again, always going back to, what's the purpose of my portfolio though? What am I trying to convey to hiring managers? I want to showcase that I can make a great final project or final course, but I also need to showcase my process and how can I do that within my own style. One of the things I want to mention really quickly that I also struggled with, and I wish this was around while I was creating my portfolio, is finding content and finding resources to create projects, especially if you don't have any kind of experience. I can't recommend enough trying to get some freelance work in. But while you're doing that, a really great resource that I want to share is through Tim Slade's e-learning community. And I've put a link here and we'll share this deck out after our webinar. But Tim has some really great prompts that are fully thought out. He gives you a well thought out problem, a training problem to solve. He gives you branded guidelines. So if you're looking for something, like if you're looking for content of what to create a course on or what to create sample work on, I think that's a really great resource and one that I cannot recommend enough. Okay, moving to research. For me, it was really important to research not just the companies that I was applying to, but also the people. And this is really going to depend on what you are looking for in a team. So sometimes it's not necessarily about the sector that you're working in, but the people that you're working with. For me, it was really important to work for a company that had female leadership. I just think, diversity is something that I really believe in. And I always think that women need to be in the room where it happens and women need to be a part of decisions. So it was really important for me to be at a place where I saw women in leadership roles. So I would encourage people, as they're researching who they are applying to and where they're applying to, what are values that you have as an employee and how can you bring that into your research. And I also want to point out, especially from teaching, is that you don't have to be an expert in whatever your company's field is. That's what your SMEs are going to be for. So I would say don't necessarily shy away from a certain sector if you feel like you don't know anything about that sector. Like Louise said, I currently work for a software company that specializes in insurance. And I like to say, before I started this job, I knew nothing about insurance other than I had it. I had insurance. So don't let, fear of not knowing all the ins and outs of what the company does let you shy away from applying. You should be able to understand their business at an introductory level and their needs, but don't feel like you have to know everything to be able to fulfill that role successfully. For the interview, I like to think the interview is a way for hiring managers to get to know you. Ideally, at this point, they'll have seen your resume and seen your portfolio, and they know the kind of work that you can produce. This is really your opportunity for them to get to know you as a person. And remember that it's a two-way conversation. They're interviewing you to see if you're the right fit for their role that they have, but you also need to be interviewing them to see if it's the right place and the right team and dynamic for you as a person. So I've put here a couple of questions that I like to ask, of course, about how they encourage work-life balance, what the short-term and long-term goals are, both for the role that you would be fulfilling, but also for the company. And then I think it's also important to ask things like how they foster culture, and how they prioritize the growth and development of their employees. So asking questions outside of just, the daily tasks and, the need that you would fulfill in this role, but how the company kind of operates as a whole, I think is important for you to know. And then lastly, salary. So this one, again, I want to emphasize doing your research, especially coming from teaching. Negotiating for your salary is such a foreign experience. That's something that as teachers, we never have to do. The school district will set our salary, and that's kind of what it is. So exploring the idea of salary negotiations was something that was uncomfortable at times, but I really think, especially as women, we have to have the confidence of a white man and just ask for what we deserve, if I'm going to be very frank. But I think it's important to understand that not all positions and not all roles within L&D are going to have the same salary. Places like higher education or small companies, Fortune 500s, they're all going to have different budgets for similar roles. So you just need to keep in mind where it is that you're applying and the number that you're asking for, keeping those kinds of factors in mind. And also the different roles within L&D are going to have varying salaries. So Glassdoor is a really popular resource that people use to kind of see what the median salary is for certain roles. And I would recommend looking at that not only for the companies that you're applying, but also a great way could be to figure out who the competitors of the company that you're applying for are and see what their competitors are paying similar roles. It just gives you kind of a nice overall idea of where you fall salary-wise and the restrictions of what you can ask. And I kind of just inherently knew that if the number I put down made me nervous, coming from teaching, then I was probably close. So just be brave, ask for the big numbers, and it'll pay off. So I'm going to pass it off to Trish, and she's going to talk about how all of these different steps build off of each other and kind of get into the perspective of the hiring manager.
Thank you, Chrissy, and thank you, everyone. I think we have about 55 plus people on the call, so thank you for joining. Exciting times to figure this stuff out. But I have to tell you, Chrissy was a great hire. And in 8 weeks after she started her job, she actually delivered her first Rise 360 comp course, a comprehensive course on insurance claims for software developers. So go figure, right? She did it, and she did a great job at it. So let me start with what was happening and why Chrissy came into my life. So I had an employee who was a really good employee, and she decided she wanted to be a project manager. I'm going to be doing a whole series on February 1st about how a training person, educator, can turn themselves into a project person and all kinds of options. That's coming February 1st, later in the week. But I had an opening. And so I needed somebody who could hit the ground running pretty quick in instructional design and be able to build out e-learning micro modules using Articulate. Rise 360 is one of their tools, as well as any of the storyline pieces. And so when I think about that, my job description had that in it. And so when you look at your job descriptions, look at those must-haves, required, anything that might be with an explanation point or a bold set type. Those are keywords, and put those keywords in your resume. Because if I scan a resume and I don't see anything related to Articulate, I'm likely going to put a big X against that. So I'm preparing a job description. I'm taking time to make sure I can really attract the people that I'm looking for to hit the ground running and meet my goals. Other than that, I was open. So most firms have recruiting screening tools or people. In the company we worked for, the screeners were an outside firm. And so I actually made the decision, I don't want you to screen my stuff. I want them all. I'll take all my own resumes. Because I have a tendency to look for more personality in a resume. I'm also looking for people with some diversity in their background with different experiences. I happen to have a bias that if you've ever worked in retail, so your high school job, college job, you usually can do a heck of a lot of other things. So I have hired people that have been department managers at a grocery store into roles in my Fortune 100 company role that turned into be outstanding hires and went on to have great careers. So I just believe there's a lot of agility there. So I've got the job description posted. The resumes are starting. I've got 74 resumes that are coming in the door. I would imagine Chrissy was probably in the top first 30. And so I start the review process. So let me tell you the first thing, my God, please make the font so somebody can read it. There are a lot of people, unfortunately, who think 9 and 10 font is a really good font. It's not a good font. And it's so they can cram so much information into the pages. And then what makes it worse is if we have too much, and too much means I've seen resumes from 4 to 8 pages long. I'll get to the first page, scan it for the beginning. I have another opinion. If you can't tell your story in a crisp 2 to 3 pages, I have no interest, because if you can't tell your story in a clean, easy to read format, lots of white space, then how am I going to hire you as an instructional designer? Can you imagine what that class would have sound like, or what that facilitation? So your resume really does speak for your personality and your style. So really, if you can get your resume down to 1 page front and back on a printed piece of paper, and I think it's okay to bleed into a 3rd page, particularly when you think about that 3rd page being things like your education or any kind of certifications that you have. I think that's completely appropriate. I'm not looking for fluff. I am looking for words that tie to metrics where possible. And the jargon is important. So Chrissy, you nailed that with all of the keywords. For me, I had a lot of good resumes. I had 74 and I had a top 20. Well, I don't have the energy or time to do 20 interviews. So I had to really step back and look at the 20 again and get to a top 12. And I literally let them marinate for a day and came back and reread them again and went down to a top 6. And I thought, okay, 6, we'll start with 6. 6 is a lot to interview. So we asked for salary requirements for the 6 candidates. 3 responded. And they were all different, and that was okay. But because the other 3 didn't respond, they were immediately out. They were eliminated. So that's why it's so important to have a salary in mind, a range. Use a $10,000 range, 80 to 90, 60 to 70. Even if you're higher than I might want to pay, if you've got the range where I could get you in a place and I think you could be worth it, you don't know what my budget is. You also don't know what my urgency is or my need. So don't make assumptions that you need to just give a number. Make sure you give a number that is a range. It really can help. I prefer $10,000 ranges. You could probably go to $15,000 ranges if that would help you. I also want you to know that I had no idea what teachers made. I never asked Chrissy what she made, didn't care. But I can tell you what we offered her was substantially $25,000, $35,000 more than where she was. And you need to hear that because companies have money to pay talent for these types of roles. There aren't that many people in the training organization where I worked. We had 7 people. So I need 7 hella people, really good, outstanding instructional design folks. And I'm willing to pay. I'd rather pay more and have fewer people that can kill it than to have a bigger team that are paid less, resentful, and aren't able to get the work done anyway. So that was kind of the resume part, and what Chrissy did hit the mark. Her resume was very simplistic, and I know it's kind of funny, but her name was in a color because I have no issue with colors, and I have no issue with various formats. She did like a raspberry color is my memory. She might tell me it was something different, but and it was a funky font, and it just caught my eye. But what I did miss on her resume, and it's not really her fault, but I did miss it, was her portfolio link. I didn't see it, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So I put her through because I'm like, well, okay, her salary range is good. I didn't look at a portfolio. We'll come back to that. We're going to skip because I didn't have one to look at. So I want to kind of give you my experience. So my hope in the research space is that she would have looked at the website and done some basics of like what these people do and looked at the color scheme and kind of the words and the jargon to pick up kind of a tone, a brand, if you will. Because you definitely want someone who can speak somewhat corporate speak and not like we're talking about middle school kids. So we move into the interview, and one of the things that I talked to her about was, it's funny you mentioned it, as I asked her what was her background related to in insurance. And she said, I have insurance and I know what a claim is. And I'm like, okay, well, you'll learn. Because she's absolutely correct. Subject matter experts, the SMEs, need to know the product and the software. She needs to be able to have a conversation to be able to pull out what she needs to design the appropriate training. And so I think that's really important for people to know, although it's always good to kind of get a background. But, her confidence of saying that, well, she only knew limited, she could learn and it shouldn't matter was very inspiring to me. So when we get into the interview, a lot of people get nervous. So one thing that helps, I think, is for you to remember we're all people and we put our pants on one leg at a time. And so you've got to bring your brain down because you tell a story. And when you tell that story in the freak out mode, you will show up nervous and less confident. So I really recommend that you think through before you even get on the interview. It's just a person. It's just a job. And I want to be my authentic me. I recommend a book called I'm a Badass. It helped me kind of remember, like, be your authentic you, because if your authentic you isn't acceptable to people, then that's not the right place for you. And so if you're somebody who's gregarious and fun or bold, and you want to have an environment where you can be that person, then you need to work for people that hire those type of people. So just remember that, and don't try to be something because you're freaking out over the bills. It will all come together. So in the interview, let's talk about that. So we're doing remote interview. The company was a remote first company that we were hiring for. And so visual is going to matter. I need to see you. I need to see what you're wearing. So I'll tell you a horror story. On a visual, I was on a call with a person to talk about a serious matter. And this person had on a muscle shirt because this person had just come from the gym. And Chrissy's going to laugh because she's heard the story before. And while I'm appalled by the fact that I'm looking at this guy in a muscle shirt, I'm also looking at his background where I'm seeing a statue of something that looks like it may have come from Italy or Greece, but it's a male and it's showing more than I needed to see in the background. So be really cautious about your background. But it was interesting that while we were in the call, he decided to play with his shoulder and there was sort of a blemish or a pimple and actually do what he needed to do to fix that thing while we're on the call. And I know you guys are probably going, really? Really? I have seen all kinds of craziness when you do interviews and when you talk to people because their nerves are getting the better of them. So they go to some kind of weird habits or they're just not thinking. So be mindful. Have your background set up. We have a fake office scene behind us. You don't need to see my pictures on my wall or my television set in my background. Make sure you're wearing something that's nice. You know, you don't have to be in a suit for an interview for certain types of jobs. So, you know, you don't have to do that. Smile, you know, smile at the camera. And then when we get to talking, don't ramble. Pretend like you're answering the question for your mom or your sister. Like, really change your mindset when you're having the conversation. But it is important to have a discussion. And you're right, Chrissy, it is a discussion. So you have to be ready to ask questions, and you had good questions. Now, I happen to believe people in education and people that are in L&D are creative spirits. So I like to ask some creative questions. So you always want to be ready for something off the wall. And your first response should be nothing that shows that you're freaking out over the question. And I'm telling you, people will go, oh my God, I don't know. Like, you know, instead it's better to go, well, that's a different question. Give me a second, and take that second. One of the questions I asked Chrissy is, if you were a fruit, what kind of fruit would you be and why? I'm checking for creativity. I don't care what her fruit is, and I don't care what her why is. I want to know if she can come up with something. And if she can show that she can think on her feet. And you all can think on your feet. Y'all been in front of a classroom. If you're a teacher, you dance every day, because you never know what can happen and what kid is going to say something, or what kid projectile vomits, or God knows what else you all put up with. But dancing on your feet is important, because you have to be able to pivot. I also like the tell me 3 words that you would describe yourself as, or people who you know or work with you would describe you. So kind of prepare those. Those are pretty common. And then I love my interview at the beginning where I just say, tell me about yourself. Now, there are a lot of people, they'll say, well, what do you want to know? Okay, really? You're asking me the question? So I really want you to step back, and if somebody asks you to tell you about yourself, tell me about yourself. You don't have to do a full dissertation on where you were born, but tell them, you know, I'm a native of Columbus, Ohio. I, you know, did this, I did that. I went to this school. In my career, here's some things I've done. Here's some things I've been really good at, I'm excited about. Here's where I'm heading in my future, whatever you want to share. It shows me you can talk. It shows me you can think on your feet. Because if you're leading a virtual instruction course or a live course, you have to be able to pivot. And just because you say you were a teacher and you can pivot doesn't mean you can. So I'm getting to see that when I ask that question. The other question I like is, why should I pick you? You know, I had a person once tell me, I don't hire anybody who doesn't ask for the job at the end. So I got one of my first starts as an executive in a Fortune 100 company, because at the end I got asked, what questions do you have for us? I blacked out, like brain gone. So I went with this. Well, it sounds like this is going to be a great opportunity, and you've heard all of my qualifications. So I only have one question. When do I start? And they were like, oh, wow, that's a great question. You know, we got a process. Really, do you have any other questions? I was mortified, I have to tell you, but I got the job. And so why should I pick you? And I'll tell you something. Chrissy got me because this is what she said to me, something to the effect of, if you take a chance on me, I will work hard for you and I will not let you down. I will do good work and I will work hard every single day. I was like, whoa. She just made a very emotional commitment to me that she was going to work it out and she was going to figure it out. And I love people who have an ability to figure it out. They don't need everybody to walk them through and spoon feed them. So she's taught me she can dance, she can taught me. So now it's time for her to go to the panels. And for us, she went to the team panel because I want to make sure the team feels that she's a good fit. Now, I have 3 candidates, remember. First candidate, highly intelligent, really good. Salary range, a little higher than I want to pay. Couple things she said, you kind of have a question mark, but okay. Second candidate, really strong, a real favorite. Chrissy, like her a lot. Not sure she's my number 1 or number 2, but she goes into panel. Panel loves her. She's clearly the number 1. Well, I don't know what she can do. I haven't seen her work. So I give her an assignment. She takes the assignment, and then my panel says, wait, why are you giving her an assignment? She has a portfolio. So I call her back. I'm like, assignment's canceled. Let me go look at your portfolio. So I missed the portfolio. That's on me, but I think she could have reminded me or made sure I knew she had one. Portfolio shows the personality of the person. Portfolio shows how they think. We use ADDIE, ADDIE. And if you're not familiar with it, just Google ADDIE Instructional Design. It's a great way to start utilizing it, and then you can use it in your resume. It's another keyword that you may see in other jobs. So what I was looking for was her graphics. Were they corporate-like? Were they cheesy cartoons, PowerPoint one level above, or were they something a little more proficient? She used multiple tools in addition to Articulant. She used other tools, so it showed she had versatility. I looked at her topics. She had some business-related topics. If you need help, do something on how to give feedback or how to problem solve. It's okay to have a fun one in your portfolio so you can show that you have a personality. And maybe it's just like how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, something simple, so that you can kind of see a diversity of their personality and a diversity of how they might approach the individual segments. Being clear on what the learning objective was. And I liked that she had voiceover. So I knew she could pull that off, and I needed that. And really, at the end of the day, it's how you think and how you chunk information so that a learner can learn. And that's what I was looking for. So as soon as I saw the portfolio and I compared it to the other gal that I was still thinking about seriously, it was hands down, her portfolio was just a lot better. I mean, not a lot. It was better. And so I don't want to downplay the other gal because she was fantastic. And the panel was really high on Chrissy. And I already liked her, and she had committed to me. So when we went to the salary piece, she had already given me a range. So she's in my range. So we were able to do that with no issue. And then all it was to wrap it up. And yes, she sent me a thank you. She linked in with me. She connected. I will tell you, she was selected, and that the second candidate that I really liked, and if I actually did go back to my company and ask, can I hire two? I have two fantastic candidates. And I was told no. And so unfortunately I couldn't hire the second lady. But the second lady reached out to me and wanted to know why. She lost sleep over the fact she didn't get the job because it was such a good experience for her. And I gave her the feedback that her portfolio was really good, but the candidate that was hired was great. And here were a few of the differences. Now, not everybody's going to do that for you. I believe in doing it because I'm an educator by heart. I want you all to do well. And so it doesn't do me any good to not help you, and it doesn't do you any good never to ask. So I think it's okay to say that I'm highly disappointed. I really wanted to work for you. You seemed like a really inspiring leader, or whatever it is you want to say, but I would love to know what edged me out so I can do better on my next interview. And not only did I tell this person what they did, I said, if I have an opportunity, you'll be the first person I contact. And unfortunately, I just never have had another opportunity for that role. So that's a lot of information, and it's 11:40 Eastern Standard Time, because I know you have different time zones. So I think we should open it up to questions. We wanted to make sure people could ask questions and really get a chance to have more of a dialogue. So with that, is Luis there? Are you facilitating this? Is it going to come through chat? How do you want to do this, sir? You're on mute.
Facilitated. Yeah, I was looking in chat. I didn't really see any questions come through. I know people wanted to connect with Chrissy and probably have some offline conversations, because Chrissy really offered some great information. And Trish, I love your story. I mean, it was so great to hear about your perspective and how you the process that you went through in hiring Chrissy. That was really had just a ton of insight there. I'm just looking about. Okay, here we go. We got one from Mark. Let me show this. Oops, it's jumping around here. All right. Could you talk about the value of a bilingual ID, please? Any tips on networking also?
I've seen a lot more of this come up recently, even just within the past year. Companies looking for applicants who are bilingual. I think, just depending on whatever company it is or whatever sector that you're working in or applying to, a lot of companies are wanting to offer their courses and their trainings in multiple languages. So I think there definitely is a opportunity out there for people who are bilingual. I've seen more of that come up even in just the past year.
Yeah, I totally agree. How about any tips on networking? I know we're going to have at
And then as
least
far as tips on networking, well, yeah, Chrissy, I want you to talk about from your point of view, but let me tell you what I would say. I don't think it's always enough just to connect with people on LinkedIn. So I accept your friend request. Take some time to actually message these people and and actually form a relationship. My job entrance into Fortune 100 was a networking opportunity that I had back and forth email back then. LinkedIn wasn't there yet. 18 months. And when a job finally opened, she thought of me to come in for the interview. She wasn't the hiring person, but her manager was. And I landed a job that propelled me into a 21-year career with a Fortune 100 company. So I do think that networking is more than just LinkedIn Connect, accepting your invite and then disappearing. So something to think about. And Chrissy, I don't know from your point of view.
Yeah, networking in my journey, just real quickly, I'll say it was vital for me. Actually, a lot of my journey started out here in TLDC last September. And well, actually 2 Septembers ago now. And just meeting people through this community and through these conferences and connecting with them on LinkedIn, like that led me to a freelancing opportunity, which allowed me to get real life experience. Networking can be huge. And I think it's intimidating to some. I will say again, coming from teaching, like you didn't have to network before, like that wasn't a thing. And a lot of people don't know where to start with that. But one thing I did to kind of get comfortable with it was even, liking other people's posts or commenting on other people's posts, and getting comfortable with sharing your journey and being a part of a community, I think can do a lot for you in the long run. You never know who all is watching what you're putting and who all is talking about you. That's how I ended up getting my first freelancing gig, is someone saw, something that I had posted and reached out to the person who offered me the freelancing gig and said, "Hey, this person I think would be really great for this role that you're trying to fill." So there are eyes and ears everywhere. Don't be afraid to just jump in there and share your experience and share your journey and grow your community.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even with events like this, we do have some of the tables hosted that are going to be in the reception area in between sessions. Check those out. I mean, it's amazing how much you can actually, the amount of connection you can actually facilitate if you go and hang out at one of those tables. I just am always surprised myself. And it is kind of by design supposed to it's supposed to sort of be like a face-to-face conference where if you go to a live event, at some location and you're in between sessions, you're actually talking face-to-face with people. This platform tries to replicate that, and it does pretty good, like when it comes to the tables. And I know that some of the people that I've met on tables, it's just the relationships have managed to manifest themselves now for years. So, and maybe at some point, if, I need to reference those folks again, I will. But yeah, I would drop in and actually talk to people if you can. So I totally agree with you. Let's see, I've got another question here from Karen Manders. And this one sounds like it's more for Trish, wondering about the tell me about yourself question, purely professional or personal info too.
I think it's always good to have a small blend. I don't think you ever need to you don't have to bring up family and children and all of that. You don't have to do that at all. But you certainly can tell them that you're a native of town. You come from a big family. You had 3 brothers. You can then go pivot into your education and on into your career. Because that way it kind of gives me a frame of more than just all you think about is work, because again, people want to have relationships with people and tasks and work are just, tasks and work. And for us in a remote first environment where 100% of every employee worked remote, there was no home office anymore in the company that Chrissy and I met from. I need to be able to build a connection through a video screen. And so I want to know a little bit more about you. And ultimately, we had people from New York, Texas, Las Vegas, Maine, and India on this team. So, kind of seeing also how vulnerable you're willing to be, like sharing anything that you want is, a little vulnerability starts to build immediate trust with people. But I don't really think you have to talk about, like, I have 9 kids and 2 dogs. You could say I'm a dog lover and talk about your pets. But I think for women, we aren't necessarily comfortable always sharing up front that we're a mom because we're concerned about unconscious bias about moms and what that means to the workforce. And so that's completely fine. But I do think a blend is the best way. Good question.
Excellent. All right. And I've got one from, I think it's Idalia or Idalia. Let me show this one on stage. And we've got a couple more after this. Trish, I was wondering what type of interviews do you like conducting? Is it with a few members of the whole team or 3 to 4 move to the next phase process?
So as the person hiring, I prefer, for me personally, I don't prefer screeners. That's just me, particularly for my immediate direct reports. So I like to do the one-on-one, and then I like to put them with the team members, a small panel. But I will tell you, as the job is bigger, if you will, and you grow in your career, you're probably going to end up in a room with 8 or 9 people or on a video conference with 8 or 9 people. But I prefer kind of those smaller groups so that people can get to know you and people can get more comfortable. But you have to be ready for the big boardroom table, sitting in the seat. I mean, I nailed that interview, but I blew it when they asked me my question. And so I had to come up with something on the fly. And I think part of it was just, I was so relieved that the hard part was over. And I took for granted the easy part. What questions do you have? And so you have to kind of be ready. But personally, as a candidate, I hate panel interviews that are with too many people. Now, I will tell you with panel interviews, let me give you some little secrets about that. Usually in big companies, there's like the interview sheet. So if you're looking for certain competencies, these are the type of questions you ask. And they're usually, tell me a time when. So tell me a time when. And then you hate the question as the applicant because they ramble on for about a minute. And you're like, what was the question? Because you're kind of nervous and you're like, okay. So sometimes it's good to repeat back. Okay, wait a minute. I want to make sure I heard you. If you kind of like zoning out because the question seems so all over the place, it's okay to kind of zone out and ask, because the worst thing is when you answer a question and you didn't answer the question they ask. But most of the people go through and pick a couple favorites. People are creatures of habit. So, you're usually only going to get 1 or 2 per competency. And then there are people who like to love that person. And, if you don't know the answer to something, don't fake it. Just say, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question, but I will look it up and get back to you. And my golly, if you say that, you better get back to them. Send it within, hours back and thank them for giving you a chance to take some time to think about it and do a little more insight on it. Because that also shows tenacity and that you're relentless. And those are all good qualities to have.
I do like Joe's comment here where Joe says, tell a story.
Any more? What
else? Let's see. I've got a couple more questions. You guys
I think telling the story makes your whole thing. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a delay here. Let me show one more here. This one's from Christina. Trish's idea of requesting all the resumes makes me hopeful. How many hiring managers would be able to have access to resumes like that haven't been filtered out by AI? Do you have any comments on this, Trish and Chrissy?
I do. When I worked for the Fortune 100 company, the same thing happened. I got like 3 resumes and I called the recruiter and I said, I only have 3 people. She said, oh no, you've got there's 30, but I scanned them out. I said, no, I want them all. So it has to be the person asking for it generally. Some people won't do that. And the person I hired was a scanned out resume because this person had been a manager of a store department. And she was the best fit. So they have to ask. It's up to the hiring manager.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. And how about this last question? This one's from Vandana. I'm looking to get back to work after a 10 plus year gap. I was an HR recruiter before I took a career break, looking for advice on how to translate my prior HR recruiting experience into instructional design. Any advice?
I think that you have to do what Chrissy did. I think you have to do 2 columns. She did a teaching column. You're going to do an HR recruiting column, and then you're going to do an instructional design column. And I think you're going to have to get creative. And frankly, I'm going to say it. Go to ChatGPT to help you frame it if you need help framing it. We have resources. I think being resourceful is what you all should do. We don't all know the answers. You don't ever want to go into a job thinking you do. It's at your fingertips. So use it. Use those resources to help you frame it better than maybe you would do it on your own. Just be able to speak to it. So it's not a lie. Can't lie.
Excellent. No, that's great. And Bobby has a nice comment for you too, and Vandana in chat. So check that out. All right. And with that, gosh, Trish, Chrissy, thank you so much. This has been a great way to open this event, to have both of you speak about your relationship with each other and the process. I learned a bunch. I mean, if there were a time, knock on wood, I have to go out and start looking for or get interviewed or have to find work again, I would definitely come back to this one and take a look at some of these wonderful tips you shared. It's inspirational and just so helpful. Lots of great comments coming through on the chat. Thanks everyone for joining us for this first session, our first session of the year. And let's see, what do we have next? We have coming up at 10 o'clock Pacific time, that's 1 p.m. Eastern. We've got Randy Redmond talking about bridging the gap with contract roles. Basically, we're going to hear about Randy's story about moving into instructional design and using contract roles to sort of get to where he is now. So I think that's really going to be a fantastic one. He's spoken for the TLDC audience in the past. So please join us in about an hour for that one. And with that, Trish and Chrissy, thanks again. It was wonderful. And we'll see you on Thursday, I believe, right?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I'm back February 1st. So hopefully we can get some. Thanks. Bye-bye.